Well, hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nick and Laura. On today's show, Laura and I are going to discuss adaptability. And we have another fun show for you today. We have invited some guests to join us up here, live and in person. You may even know some of them, so that's going to be really fun. And finally, since we're in Phoenix, let's do a little Phoenix trivia. Phoenix is actually lower than the Grand Canyon. So the Grand Canyon has an elevation of approximately 2,200 feet at its lowest point, and Phoenix averages about 1,100. So there you go. How about that?
How about that? So this is how this goes on the podcast. Nick reads an and finally that I've never heard, and sometimes I'm like blown away, and sometimes I'm like, huh. This would fall underneath, Thank you for that.
Yeah. But we are honored to have a sponsor today, not just because I don't have to make up one on the spot, but this is going to be Smart Comment. Looking to enhance public engagement and streamline your organization's regulatory process? Introducing Smart Comment, the cutting-edge web-based software platform designed specifically for public comments and community engagement campaigns. With Smart Comment, you can revolutionize your rulemaking, permitting, and regulatory and policy changes. Say goodbye to outdated, time-consuming methods and embrace the power of Smart Comment's innovative tools. Transparency and accessibility are at the core of Smart Comment's mission. Empower citizens to participate actively and voice their opinions while providing agencies and consultants with a powerful and efficient method for collecting and responding to public comments. Ready to experience the future of public engagement? Schedule a demo today by visiting www.smartcomment.com or emailing info@smartcomment.com. Discover how Smart Comment can transform your organization's processes and make a positive impact on your community.
All right, well, let's get started. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Hit that music.
There we go.
So that's the part on the show where the music plays?
Yeah.
All right, and we could, bear and near, do it.
Yeah, I know, right now, yeah. This is the post-production process, don't worry.
This is a really special time to be here for the second live, and we can't do this, every single week. Putting out an episode is a lot of work.
Yeah.
But we can't do this without our volunteers. So we want to, before we jump into our topic, to give a shout out to Sam Bartleson, Kara Lebold, Morgan Tassone, and we also want to give a big shout out to Hannah Patel for handling all of our social media. She's sitting over there.
Yeah.
So we have an excellent team behind EPR helping us do all of our editing and get comments and invite our guest speakers. So if you're interested in getting involved, please check out the website at environmentalprofessionalsradio.com. And there's a sponsor form there, as well as a place to invite yourself to be a guest. And along those lines, we could not have also reached those milestones without being adaptable.
Yeah.
So Nick, what are your thoughts on today's topic?
Adaptability. Well, it's funny, adaptability is something I think almost everyone in this room has to do on a daily basis. We all have clients who have a statement of work and then the actual statement of work, so there's always a flexibility and a requirement for doing things that are a little bit outside of what we expect. But it's one of those things that I don't think we can just say, everybody needs to be flexible, and that's that, right? We talk a little bit about how do we manage things? How do we plan for adaptability? And I think that's really important for us. We have to plan. We know that there's going to be challenges. So how do we do that? What do we do to be more adaptable?
Right. I think that it's a mindset, first and foremost. And I've been hearing this a lot. Actually, I've been taking a lot of Uber rides around the area in Phoenix. And even my Uber drivers are talking about how they've adapted to post-COVID life, and they're driving Uber because they had to adapt to new situations or a new family life change or something like that. So it's been on my mind. And also just the last couple of weeks, you've been traveling. I've been traveling.
Yeah.
We've had to be very adaptable in our daily situation and try to make this podcast happen. So I think in everyone's daily work and just in life in general, especially as things are moving faster with AI and post-COVID changes? Are we going back to the way things were before COVID in some companies, like adapting to today's how we're doing this and tomorrow we're not, with all these regulatory changes as well? Like, this is the word of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And, like I say, like, it's part of, it's in our blood sometimes, but, there's a difference, I think, between, having an innate ability to be adaptable and then learning it as a skill. You can do that too. And I think it's really, sometimes we are afraid of doing that. We're afraid of saying, can we actually get better at being flexible? And, I think, honestly, it's just like any other skill we have. Sometimes you just got to practice. And sometimes you have to practice. You're basically on a roller coaster, and it's going to go down whether you want it to or not, Like, that's kind of how it is. But the ride ends, and then you get off, and you think about, okay, how can we do that better? Do I need to get on this roller coaster again?
Yeah. Well, this is evolution, right? I went to park in, I think, the Badlands, and there were signs up all over that said adapt or perish. And that's really what's happening here. You're going to adapt to your changes in your role at your work, or you're going to get fired, or you're going to quit, or you're going to go crazy.
Yeah.
We can adapt to the technology changes that are happening, or we can become outdated, or we can just go with it, accept it. And I think I'd rather adapt than perish.
Yeah, me too. That's a preference. It's my preference. But, it's funny, like, we talk about, like, one of the things that helps, is being prepared. There's a lot of planners in here, right? There's a lot of planners. And sometimes the role that you're in still allows you to plan for being adaptable, right? When you know that I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks, we can figure out, okay, how do we do the show? And that it means one time we record where it looks like I'm trapped in a basement, but hey, that's okay.
That was my favorite.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Having defined roles within your teams and understanding, if someone's going to leave or be gone for a while, how do we adapt to that change? And knowing what positions we need to fill is very helpful. But I don't know. I think I'm ready to bring on the guests. I think everyone here is ready to bring on our guests.
Heck
and we can ask them about adaptability too.
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, so our first guest is Eileen Baden. Eileen was a Parks and Open Space Planner at the Maricopa County Parks and Recreation Department. That's here in Phoenix. And she is now serving on the board of the Friends of the Daisy Mountain Trails in North Valley. Some of you may recognize her from a presentation she gave yesterday. So welcome, Eileen.
Uh-oh. Oh, wow.
Can you hear me okay?
Is she on? She's not on. Pause.
We can share. Hi, everyone. My name is Eileen Baden. And,
Adaptable. Love it.
I want to welcome all of you to Phoenix. I'm the past president for the Arizona Association of Environmental Professionals. I helped a little bit on the conference planning committee, and just so excited to see so many folks from across the country here in Phoenix. Again, want to recommend going to the Desert Botanical Garden, as Mayor Gallego did as well. A lot of fantastic plants there and great views as well. So so as she was mentioning a little bit about my background, mostly I did a presentation yesterday on the Recreation Public Purposes Act, but I went to school at Arizona State University, got my master's in urban and environmental planning, was an environmental planner for about 7-8 years, went back to ASU and did career development for students, and then was the Park and Open Space Planner. So yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. So what are your thoughts on adaptability?
Well, I made it here this morning, and I have 2 kids. I made it to the conference. So, I think adaptability is just about, pushing yourself to show up, get up, splash some cold water on your face, and try to keep, sometimes things get tough, but then after they're done, I think we're all really proud of the work that we've accomplished and the hard work we've put into, showing up and doing hard things.
Awesome. Good advice. All right, so let's talk about your career path a little bit. That's what we do here at EPR, is talk about career paths and people's jobs. And looking back at yours, it kind of looks like you made a beeline for the position and the work that you do. Is that, in hindsight for you, what actually happened?
Well, I was really interested in park planning, and so I actually just got an email when I was a student in the master's program for urban and environmental planning that the town of Eager, Arizona, in northeastern Arizona, wanted somebody to help with a park plan. So I worked on that project for over 2 years, did public outreach, when there's no budget involved. I was able to do a lot more public meetings and go out, and I did a survey with the community, went to their high school, talked to students. So then when I started doing NEPA work, I was doing a lot of transportation work, and I later on switched positions to a company that had more park and recreation type of projects. So I worked on the Rock and River Ranch State Park Planning Project in Camp Verde, Arizona, and then I worked on the Vulture Mountain Regional Park Environmental Assessment. And so that was Maricopa County Parks and Recreation Department was using the Recreation Public Purposes Act to build this new regional park, and I worked on the NEPA document years ago, which then I met folks, which helped me, I think, get the job at the Parks Department as the Park and Open Space Planner. So,
Awesome. Any advice for people who are looking to get into that type of work?
yeah, I mean, I think definitely. I like to be involved with a couple different organizations. I spoke at the National Recreation Park Association Conference in Phoenix this year about our regional park planning effort. And so I think it's about just going to meetings that are interesting, getting signed up on those listservs. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect. And I just like when folks share articles and information that, it's just about learning as much as we can about parks, trails, and open space, the importance of it, and how we can tie in planning and transportation, because I see a lot of opportunity with the IIJA Act that we can have a lot of overlap, I just see a lot of need for it in the community.
What is the IIJA Act?
The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So, yes, I do. I see a lot of opportunity with Arizona Department of Transportation working with Arizona State Parks, because with their statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, that plan guides where land and water conservation funds go in Arizona, and one of their main elements is pathways to health and wellness. So there is a lot of connection and overlap between transportation and recreation.
Heck yeah, that's very cool. And on top of all of that, you have 2 young kids, you volunteer and serve on the board of the Friends of Daisy Mountain Trails. So how do you find the time to do all that?
My mom lives with me. Thank you to my mother for taking care of my kids while I'm here. That is literally the only reason it's hard, and I give kudos to all working parents out there, definitely to single parents. It's just they're so hungry all the time, and so it's hard to like 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch. So I've been noticing I've been working at night a lot and on weekends. This is the first time I did the presentation on the Recreation Public Purposes Act. I really like to share information with other folks who haven't heard of possible things they could use before. And somebody from Lake Havasu City told me that there's quite a bit of BLM land up there. This is in Arizona, and she sees opportunity for using the RMPP Act in her own community. So I don't know how I find the time, but I'm, Daisy Mountain is Arizona state land in the North Valley, and all the Arizona state land is really designated for the education system here. But there is one project in Prescott Valley, Yavapai County, that they're building the first Yavapai County Regional Park, and they're doing a partnership with where Arizona State Land is letting them raise the funds over 10 years. And this is a fantastic, good example of something we may be able to do to help protect Daisy Mountain and public access to the mountain.
That sounds like really awesome work. Thank you for sharing. And lastly, before we bring up the next guest, would you like to give a shout out to the Arizona AEP?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much to Jennifer Jennings, David McIntyre, and the rest of the board that worked so hard on the conference planning committee. I'm so honored to be involved with AZAEP for over 10 years. I really want to encourage everyone to go to our website, azaep.org, and join our listserv. On Wednesday, we'll be having the last session, the box lunch, will be an overview about our organization, how you can get more involved, and if you're not in the the Phoenix region or Tucson area, you can still join our meetings virtually. And we have a LinkedIn page. So yeah, I've learned so much by going to our monthly meetings. It's really helped expand my knowledge as an environmental planner to a way that I never would have been able to through just the projects I do at work. One month it's on noise, another month it's on air quality. So I am just really grateful for all the hard work the volunteers put into AZAP.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eileen, for joining and for all that you do and for being part of a regional chapter. And with that, we're going to leave Eileen up here so she can participate in some future discussion, but we're going to bring up our next guest, which is Pam Hudson. So let's see. Pam is the Senior Associate Counsel for Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command Southwest. Come on up, Pam. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much. Man, that was a tough act to follow. Eileen, you're awesome. Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. Thank you both for having me today.
Awesome. All right, so we're adapting to our microphone situation. We've been trying to get you on the show for a while, and you're finally here, so woohoo!
Thank you, I'm thrilled.
Yes, and you always present at these conferences, and you presented yesterday. How'd it go?
Well, on the topic of adaptability, we didn't have Michael Smith with us, so we had to have Fred Wagner come in and talk about some of the cases, and Chuck Nicholson, who comes from the energy area. So we adapted to that, and the speakers, I really feel like they embraced that concept and really told that story. So I think it went well, but we'll find out.
You're getting applause, so I think that's a good sign. And you give a lot of presentations, is that right?
Right, so in my previous job before this one, we taught environmental law to the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy, and actually because I was in the LA area, I actually have 2 public speaking coaches, one of which coaches the Oscars. So wow. I was no good at public speaking for 3 straight years, and my training was horrible. And then finally, I did all this training, I listened to podcasts, so it is very technique-based.
Wow, that's really cool. All right, any advice you could, secret sauce you could share with us?
Right, so it's a skill. It's not a talent. No one's inherently, maybe Fred is, but generally speaking, everyone else has to kind of work at it a little bit, and I think it's a skill. And there's a lot of great podcasts out there. The Public Speakers Podcast is one that I listen to.
Nice, nice. All right, so you manage a lot of people in your role?
Right, so my new job is I'm a manager, one of the managers, and I have a boss in the office, but of a large field office in the Navy with all attorneys. And so my new role is really not being as technical as I'd like to be, but really just managing, and that is kind of like it's the same as managing any environmental team, encouraging trust, and just trying to support the people. We have really good people in the office right now. How do I get them promoted? How do I get them new opportunities? Because they're just killing it. So I'm really happy to be in my role, and so that's kind of what I focus on, is this idea of trust.
So that's really cool. So and honestly, I would assume they very much appreciate that. You know, we talk about how do you like to be managed. Most people don't say, I want someone hovering over me at all times. I've never heard that, you know? So do you have challenges with different people? Because everybody's a little different. How do you manage people who have different personalities?
Oh, so we have a lot of different personalities, like in every role. But I actually think, speaking on the topic of adaptability, since COVID, we're much more likely to interact in the online environment through telework or through remote work. So we set up more meetings. I feel like the communication is a little better. Before, remember, I'd awkwardly go into somebody's office and be like, "What are you working on today?" But now we kind of have team meetings and regular communications. So I feel like the communications improved since telework for us.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point. Like we've all kind of adapted to. We adapted during COVID, and now post-COVID, things have changed quite a bit. Like I think telework is one of those examples. How else do you guys have you changed the way you do things post-COVID?
Yes, so we've actually, like, in our office, we've gotten together, and by the way, I'm speaking on my own behalf and not that of the Navy or the DoD, but in our office, we have a best practice principles for hybrid telework environment. So one of the things we've adapted is for new people coming in, we actually have them come in, we set up meetings. We have to put a little bit more time and training into new, whether they're experienced or not, new people joining our office. And so that's one of the things we've adapted to. I'm not sure I answered that question perfectly.
Oh, but I have a follow-up question.
Okay.
How do you onboard your people?
Okay, so we onboard our people. We take them out to lunch the first day. We have to get them, into the computer system, which for us could take a while, like everybody. And we spend time making sure they have training, and we spend a little bit of time with them. And to meet the other parts of the team that aren't lawyers, the non-lawyers, you know what I mean? So we try to kind of have more face-to-face interactions. But there's definitely the techniques. You can't just bring your new people on, and when we're teleworking, they don't really know anybody.
Yeah.
So for us, yeah, that's a big deal for us. And I'm a big proponent of telework and remote work and bringing people on. So we do a little bit extra. On Tuesdays, we have a staff meeting where we have a question, like, what's your favorite food in San Diego? Or what's your favorite hamburger? And everyone just talks about, and that's the only thing we talk about at that meeting, for the most part. So we do that every week, and we try to have, we'll have meetings outside the office for lunch if we are going to meet, and different ideas like that.
Yeah, so like creating a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's important. I want to take a second to ask you, this wasn't in our original list, so I'm popping this on you, but
I'm okay.
I just all of a
I'm
sudden got
rolling.
curious about
I'm
your career-
adaptable.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Your career path. How have you gotten where you are, Pam Hudson?
I don't know. That's a good question. I wish I knew, but I started off a ROTC out of Auburn and was going to be a pilot, but I have bad eyes, so I was an oceanographer and decided right then I'd go to law school, and went to law school and was happily in private practice, but I was a Navy reservist, always environmental law. And Navy reserves and private practice is difficult. So I joined the Navy Office of General Counsel thinking I'd just be there for a year or two, and it's been a lovely, expansive environmental practice from MMPA. It's very sophisticated. We have offices around the world, a very sophisticated practice, and I just stayed. I don't know how I got here, but I feel very lucky.
Oh, man.
Oh, awesome. All right, we're going to switch to some personal questions. I need you to describe what fiber art is for Nick, and I don't want to tell you what he thought it was.
I mean,
because I don't want to embarrass him.
well, no, we're here. I'll do it. I heard fiber, like fiber optic, is what I was thinking. I was like, oh, wow, she uses technology and art. And Laura just looked at me like I was like you guys are right now, actually. It's very similar to that.
Right. So I kind of brought that. I like this idea that I feel like we all need outside hobbies,
Yeah.
whether it's sports, whether it's hanging out maybe with your kids alone and going to different places, but we need things outside of the office. So I have a group of folks in the Los Angeles area, Ventura County area, that do weaving and spinning. We create wool from fiber arts. We make clothes out of that. So just all of that. I mean, if I'd started earlier, I might be a cobbler right now. I don't know. But I like all of that. How do you deal with fabric from sewing? And I can do quilting. But I didn't learn until I was in my, 38. I didn't do any of that till I was about 38. And it's really important, I think, to be able to express your creativity and to have friends who know you outside of work that you can just interact with.
Very cool.
Yeah, so why did you choose fiber art?
What's that?
Why'd you choose fiber art?
I've always had an interest in color and fiber, and I've always been drawn to it my entire time. And I don't know, I just really like the medium of working with fiber, and it's very hands-on, and you're really focused. You can't think of anything else while you're working on that.
Oh, yeah.
So I always knew I always wanted to do it, but I didn't have time until like my late 30s, like many of us do. Like when you're in your 20s, you're just trying to work on your career and do different things, and it's kind of hard to develop those hobbies and crafts, or we call them arts.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, and actually taking the time to do it too, even if you know you need to. Sometimes you don't do that in your 20s. Like, I can do anything, and then you're like, well, I should also do something positive and fun for me, you know?
Right, yeah. So it was surprising. So just one thing led to another.
There we go. When we asked you about your, what personal things you wanted to talk about today, you also said that you are now thriving as the less smart one in a relationship.
Right, so in my own mind and in my family, I always felt like I was the smart one, but it turns out no. And especially true, I've recently got engaged to a PhD environmental engineer.
Oh, wow.
And,
Congrats.
Right,
Yeah,
so
congrats.
I've just given up that I'm going to be the smart one. Thank you. And it's very relaxing. I have to tell you, he has plenty of intellectual curiosity for the both of us, so I can just be like, what do you think of this?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't have to, like, I'm not in charge. I like
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's really awesome. And like I say, we'll keep you up here as well. Thank you again so much for joining us. It's so great to have you on. And finally, we have our legal guru and rep from our repeat sponsor, Venable LLP, Fred Wagner, walking up to the stage now. Let's give him a hand. I think that might work. We'll see if the mic is hot. How you doing, Fred?
I'm awake,
Yeah? Good.
which is good,
Yeah. Oh, man. So it's always great to have you here. And honestly, we've lost track of the number of times we've had you on the show. It's just always a lot of fun. And I know we have a list of things we want to talk about, but we talk about adaptability. And yesterday, I think the case law is one of the most adaptable things I've seen. So very well done.
Thank you.
How did you, I really want to start there. Like, when you get questions like that, and Pam, you could answer this too, when something you're not expecting, how do you manage it? How does the panic button not go off in your head?
Well, as a lawyer, you're trained to do oral arguments, and you go in with a prepared text, prepared arguments, and then it's out the window after about 22 seconds. and I don't know if you've seen any of these where you go, Your Honor, I'm Fred Wagner representing first question. It's like, no, it's Fred Wagner. Did I get that right? That's my name. Is it? No, they're asking questions that they want to hear. And so one of the things you learn early on is that you have to understand your audience, and you have to understand what they want. And so even though you have in the back of your mind what you want to convey, you also have to respond to the people right in front of you. And so one of the biggest mistakes I see lawyers make is that the question will come in on X, your prepared text is Y, and you keep on talking about Y even though the question is X.
Yeah.
The adaptability is just to acknowledge the other person. And I think the corollary to being adaptive is listening.
Yeah.
If you listen to what the other person is saying in front of you, if you get a sense of what the other person is feeling, you could see it in their eyes, you could see it in their body language, you could see it in the way they're interacting with you. If you have that sense of awareness, it's a lot easier to be adaptable because you could begin to see a little bit into the soul of the person that you're dealing with. I think I think it was George W. Bush who said that he saw into the soul of Putin. And he knew what Putin was all about.
Terrifying.
That is a terrifying thought. But in some ways, it was, I think, a very mature statement, because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to go over there and charm the pants off whatever leader. It was trying to understand that person.
Right.
And so I think when you get something that's surprising or different, you have to immediately put yourself in the shoes of that person. What are they saying? Why are they saying that? And the thing I found interesting and very pleasantly surprising about yesterday's presentation was that I was in a room of professionals who, in some ways, expressed skepticism over the things that I was conveying. So I was an advocate. I understood what I was advocating on behalf of my client, but yet, you heard rumblings in the room about, wait a minute, is that right? And you could feel the sense of trying to poke holes in what you were doing.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I said, that's fair.
Right.
That's absolutely fair. I don't expect 200 people in a room to agree with everything I say. I hope 200 people in the room agree with everything I say, but I know that's not possible. And so because of that, then you got to meet them with their questions and their skepticism. And if you respond to it fairly, even if they still disagree, that's what creates a good conversation.
Yeah, very well said. And we didn't plan this, but that ties right into my next question for you. So, we talk a lot about the post-pandemic world, and I want to ask you about how that really applies to planning and NEPA reviews, because even the way we commute, the way we communicate has changed a lot in the last few years. So how does those changes, how do those trends kind of work with NEPA?
Yeah, I mean, it changes in every shape and form, doesn't it? I mean, the first thing that I found was I was working on any number of transportation projects. March 2020 hits. We're all staying at home, and it took project opponents about 37 seconds to write letters to the lead federal agency saying, hey, no one's ever going to drive anymore, so we don't need your project. You know, how many people got those letters, right? Or that everybody's going to stay at home, or everybody's going to ride a bicycle, or everybody's going to use transit. And so literally we were engaging with our users, our end users, and our advocates of the community about, you know, what does this, you know, truly mean? And after we, you know, patiently said, we don't know, you know, we don't know yet, and it's going to take years for us to know. So that was one level, which is what does it mean practically in terms of how people are going to get around and why. The second thing you raised is the way we communicate. And there was emergency meetings all across the country about changing from the typical kind of public meetings and public outreach to virtual meetings. And whether that was going to be successful, whether that was going to be fair, whether that was going to be provide equal access to people who may not have access to the internet, and so on and so forth. And of all the things that we've discussed, and I'll talk about the transportation trends back, I'll circle back to that in a minute. But of all the things that we faced, I think happily, I think we've determined that this issue of, a new paradigm of virtual communication has actually been a net positive. It's actually been a net positive. We've seen the number of comments that we've received from the public increase, not decrease. We've seen the diversity of communities that have produced comments and input into the projects increase, not decrease. We've seen the types of comments and the types of concerns, the range of concerns increase, not decrease. And so while we still always have to be cognizant of the fairness and the equity concerns about how we deal with a virtual environment, I think what we're learning is that it is more inclusive in general. In general. That's not to say we're not going to have public meetings. We will. We're going to have different public meetings now, I think. But so that's been a happy result, I think, of the pandemic, and it's only going to get better. I think it's only going to get better over time. I remember conversations about 10 or 15 years ago when we first started putting up email addresses on project sites. It doesn't seem that long ago.
Yeah.
And I got panicked calls from my project managers saying, Fred, you're not saying that we have to respond to every email we get from people, right? That's not part of the record, right? right. And I said, oh, no, that could possibly be part of the record. And then, of course, and then over the course of the last month or two, I just worked on a massive administrative record that had 1.1 million files, 800,000 of which were email.
Whoa.
Just trying to get an administrative record together. So we haven't quite licked that one yet. we haven't quite figured that one out yet. But in terms of the question about inclusiveness, I think it's a net positive. But then circling back to the transportation trends, so you fast forward 3 years, we got the letters, no one's going to drive anymore.
Right.
You know, now it's 3.5, 4 years later, people are driving almost more than ever. And so the question is, where are they driving? Why are they driving? To where are they driving? Where are these, trips coming from? And then everyone's going to drive, take transit. Transit is down 40 to 50% across the country. In the major transportation sectors and in big cities that are used to transit. And the transit systems are facing challenges like they've never faced before. If you read the Washington Post, I do, just yesterday, this unbelievably compelling article about a bus driver and her life in Denver and what it's like to be a bus driver these days in Denver. And it was a sad story about how she starts at 5:30 in the morning, and people get on her bus that are without homes. They use the bus as their shelter. The people on the route, their decorum and their behavior is different than it was before. There's been an increase in attacks and violence against bus operators, not just in Denver but around the country. And so this notion of how we get around and how we plan is facing challenges like we've never seen before. And I think what we have to be open to is the fact that we can't make the same assumptions we've made, that we're going to have to be open to this level of uncertainty in terms of predicting the future, and that there's going to be some very sad and challenging stories, but there's also going to be some good stories. A great story I saw yesterday about the conversion of office buildings in Seattle to apartments.
Yeah.
You know, to try to get, you know, to help address the question of home affordability and access to housing in major urban areas. And the picture I saw of this office looked like a really lovely apartment.
Yeah.
You know, I'd live, work there, you know, type of thing. You know, and so it's constantly evolving. We're learning more, and I think the advice I can give to planners and environmental consultants in the room when we're dealing with these kind of projects is don't be afraid to embrace uncertainty. Don't be afraid in your documents, in your analyses, to tell the public, and then eventually for the lawyers to tell a court, we're just not sure.
Everyone's favorite.
That's fine. If you don't know for sure that there's going to be 1,822 bus trips in 2040, so what? We're not sure. And here's why we're not sure. And here's the things that are shaking out. And in some ways, the honesty about what you don't know is more transparent and more refreshing than trying to be so goddamn sure of yourself. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think the adaptability for this profession is saying, look, we can be honest and transparent about what we don't know, how we're trying to figure it out, and still be confident that it can be a defensible product in doing so.
Yeah, perfect.
I see Eileen taking a lot of notes. Eileen, do you have a follow-up question for Fred?
Well,
Wait.
I was wondering if
More
transportation is
questions?
down.
Who's taking more questions?
Well, because of remote work, you know, and so I guess we'll just have to see how things shake out. But it is, I personally enjoy being able to have different multimodal options of transportation, and so I think it's something, like you said, we need to look at data over time and see how things go. But it's so funny because I think it just all comes down to being respectful of, in Maricopa County parks, the trail users. The biggest issue is like trail conflict, right? It's like the equestrians, and mountain bikers, and then it all comes back to like the tribes.
As well. We have the horses in DC. That's a big problem on Connecticut Avenue.
But so it's just again about, like, I was in the Section 106 session yesterday, and I just think it's about, like you were saying earlier, listening to that other person, and it all comes down to, you know, we can work on better projects, we can have better outcomes if we just listen a little bit more to the other person. Kind of on the topic of adaptability, I wanted to just quickly say that, so earlier I mentioned that we look a lot at environmental impacts, but that I think NEPA documents, it would be great if we looked at the social impacts a little bit more closely, because NEPA does cover environmental and social impacts. So I asked yesterday during the luncheon if we could look a little bit more closely at the Americans with Disabilities Act, Architectural Barriers Act, because if the NEPA planner isn't looking at how can this project be possibly a little bit more accessible for folks, then, you know, who is looking at it? And so we really do need NEPA planners being that double check, looking for, okay, we have this park and trail project. Can the first mile or segment to a viewing spot be, you know, a DG path, something that's more accessible? And so it's being adaptive, and also that means looking at the outreach that we're getting from the public and listening to it. So from the Maricopa County Parks and Recreation Survey, they showed that how we could improve visitor experience, number one was interactive web-based maps, because people want to get out to the trail safely, right? Number two was helping low-income underserved groups, and number three was ADA accessibility. We had over 1,400 responses to that survey. So again, you know, adaptability, e-bikes are becoming more popular. You know, we need to adapt. We see the scooters out on the streets. They're a lot of fun, just be careful. And so, but I do think we need to adapt to all the new technologies we're seeing. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I think.
And you know, it's funny, we'd be tying that into our next question for Fred. You know, we talk a little bit about NEPA and permit reform, right? We've talked about that a few times. We know some things are on the horizon. Is it happening?
Yeah, I think the short answer is it is. And although it's probably not the smart betting person's wager, given the fact that there are right now a half a dozen specific pieces of legislation that have been introduced on the Hill, even with the split Congress, even with all the great disagreements on the Hill, it seems to be more likely than not that there's going to be some coalescing around some version of permit reform. Now, some of the proposals that are out there are relatively extreme, and I don't think they stand a chance, but some of the co-sponsors of these bills are Democrats. There are moderate Democrats that are co-sponsoring some of these bills, and there are some progressive Democrats that are co-sponsoring some of these bills because they understand that the permit reform efforts apply equally to renewable energy as they will to other sorts of projects. And they understand that if they want more electric vehicles on the road, they need the critical minerals to help support the electric vehicle infrastructure. And so what we're seeing is commonality from both sides of the aisle. The challenge is time. There's not a lot of time. The debt crisis is going to happen first, and maybe or maybe not that will be resolved in the next 10 days. Please check your 401ks and maybe your mattresses to see how much room there's in your mattress. But beyond that, there's not a lot of time. Because this, the year is ticking away, and then before you know it, the election season kicks in. And for those of you who know anything about Washington, once the election season kicks in, that is not conducive to legislation. That is not conducive to just about anything productive. But there is, right now, half a dozen proposals that are being debated. There's been at least 1 or 2 hearings every week on this issue, Nick. So even though, most people would say, I'll bet against legislation, I'm going to take some odds and put it down that I think something's going to happen.
All right. And speaking to, one of the things Eileen was mentioning about, social equity and doing more for different groups, are you expecting some of that legislation to touch on those topics as well? No, I don't think so. I think that is a little bit of a third rail, for the right. And I think as it is, they're seeing some of the measures coming out of the administration. They're already, I think, pushing back on that, Nick, a little bit. Right. So although the equity for all legislation has been out for many months, I just think it's a little bit of a third rail. I think that there's a reason why the permit reform and the NEPA reform measures are called energy access, because the focus on the right is related to access to energy. And so to the extent that it's perceived, correctly or incorrectly, that an overemphasis on equity concerns means less oil and gas because it's more greenhouse gases and therefore we don't want it, that just walks head right on into the administration's current policy initiatives, and that's like a magnet, where you have the magnets and they sort of repel against each other. That's what it feels like to me. Right. So that's why I think the notions of the agreement centering around energy access, whether it's renewable energy or traditional energy, more energy, that's where it's going to be. Okay. And so if you introduce some of these other concerns like equity or whatnot, that's going to just drive them apart. And if you need any more proof of that, just look at Joe Manchin. He was the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act. And a couple of weeks ago, he came out and said that I would vote to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, he's got magnets repelling inside his, own heart. Yeah. And so that's really indicative of, I think, where the challenge is on some of those issues, Nick. So my prediction is that you'll see the administration continue to pursue these initiatives through executive orders and through policies. You'll see oversight hearings on the Hill challenging those very same policies, but it's not going to be something where there's going to be additional legislation, unfortunately.
All right, aside from that, do you have any other predictions you'd like to make for the 2024 election season?
Oh, boy.
It's being recorded, so.
Well,
Place your bets now.
yeah, look, this is a really, it's really, again, my whole career in Washington, D.C., I'm an amateur pundit at home. When I watch the TV and I watch the pundits on TV, I think, gosh, I could do that. I could make these predictions and be wrong, just like everybody else.
Right.
And get paid for it. But this is a cycle like I don't think we've ever seen. I don't know if we've ever seen a cycle where the vast majority of the American public doesn't want the choices that are going to be presented to it.
Yeah.
It's going to be bizarre. When you walk into a process where 60 to 70% of the electorate is going to say, we don't want to even consider the choices on the paper in front of us, and yet there it's going to be. And right now, given the momentum in the Republican Party, given the way the money is starting to shake out, given the way some of the polling is shaking out, and just giving the clock and the proximity to some of the primaries that are coming up within 6 months, right now, the betting is on Donald Trump being the nominee.
Right.
And in the Democrats, of course, the president's going to be the nominee. So you have this repeat of 2020. And it's clear from all public polling, this, not Fred speaking, but public polling, that gosh, we'd like something else. We'd like to choose something else, and it's not going to happen. So that's going to create a very peculiar dynamic.
Yeah.
Because as much as people want new faces and new choices, the top of the ticket is going to be the old choices, literally the old choices. Yeah, and so it's gonna be a really bizarre cycle because you're gonna have both parties saying, hey, we want to motivate the youngs. Let's get the youngs.
Yeah.
And the youngs are going to say, yeah,
That's great. But
good luck with that.
yeah.
Get me motivated to do that. And so, look, it's still very early, but the initial indications are, it's like we were talking yesterday at our session. I'm doing a rerun of the 1974 presentation. I mean, it could very well be a rerun of 2020. So whether you like it or not, right now that's where it's headed, bud.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about our environmental regulations and policy? Are they all going to keep going in their trajectory, or?
Yeah, and this is where if you're a lawyer in the room, kind of hold your ears. The lawyers are really screwing this up. They are. What we're seeing is you can't try anything. You can't issue any sort of regulation, any sort of rule without the litigation being filed 18 nanoseconds later. We have very aggressive states attorneys general, led by the great state of West Virginia, where they find any environmental regulation and they find a way to challenge it in court. And not only that, but they find a way to challenge it in Amarillo, Texas, or North Dakota, where they're forum shopping to find certain judges that are going to likely say no to these regulations. And so, from my client's perspective, it's the worst of all worlds. All they want is certainty, Nick and Laura.
Yeah.
All they want is certainty. Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it. Tell me where to invest my money, and I'll invest it. Tell me how to produce the best outcomes, and I have the resources to do it. But don't tell me to do one thing on Monday, and then another thing on Wednesday, and then reverse it in a court hearing on Friday, and then go back and tell me to do something different on Tuesday, and then the following Thursday. And that's where we are.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. The Waters of the United States rule is the perfect example. We're still waiting for the Sackett ruling. Every time I come on your show, is it coming?
Yeah.
Is it coming? Is it coming? Still waiting for it. And you have 5 different challenges to the new rule. You've got 3 different injunctions in place in 3 different courts around the country, all with different scopes. And the people who just want their permits are saying, what do I do?
Yeah.
And I have to pull out a map of the United States. and say, well, if you're in this state, you can do this. But if you're in that state, you can do that. And if you're in this state, you can do that. That's awful.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the lawyers of the country are not doing any favors to the environment. You know, we're at a point where we're losing track of the raison d'etre of this whole thing, which is, you know, public health and safety. And we're getting so bollocksed up in what's in these challenges to all the rules that the notion of the regulated community trying to get better outcomes is now being, you know, retarded because they can't get to an answer. They don't know what to do. And so they don't do anything because they have to wait. And instead of advancing, there's stasis. And that ain't good. So it's not a happy story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, does anybody disagree? I mean, it's just not a happy story.
Yeah.
No, that's the answer we expected. So,
Yeah.
If I can come up with a happy ending, I'll come back and I'll tell you what's going on, right?
all right, so let's change it to personal questions while we still have time. Which one do I want to do here, Nick?
I mean,
I'm gonna ask the one I know that Nick wants to ask. So it's kind of a PSA. So, because it's our job to ask the question that's on everyone's mind, but I'll do it for Nick.
Please.
What's the deal with kidney stones?
Kidney stones. Well, 3 weeks ago, I had my third bout with kidney stones. And I believe that kidney stones is God's way of giving men a slight window on women's burden of giving birth.
slight. He said slight.
Slight. Did I say slight?
Yeah.
I said slight. So you walk into the emergency room, and it's one of the only maladies, I think, where you don't even have to check in. And the nurse who sees you says, kidney stones, room 1. You're doubled over in pain, you know, and you have this look on your face like, you know, what can I do? And so they take you in right away, and they say, okay, when did it start and whatnot? And you know it's coming. That's the other thing that's terrible. You feel it coming, and you're saying, okay, maybe it'll just go away. No, it's sitting there. It's not going to go away. And so you go into the room, and they say, okay, first thing we do is make you comfortable. And that's great. All I want is comfort. Please, give me comfort. And so they try one medicine on me, and I'm still doubled over in pain. And I'm in the bed, and it's still doubled over in pain. They said, oh, are you feeling better? I said, look at me. No, I am not. So let's try the second one. So the first one, second one into the IV. No different. Now it's like 45 minutes since I've been sitting in the bed. The person comes back and says, okay, now we're going to give you the one that everyone says works. And I turned to him and said, why is that number 3?
Yeah.
Why are you waiting for it? So sure enough, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. But there's nothing they can do, so they just kind of send you home.
Were your nurses female?
Did they hear you talk about pregnancy? Is that what?
No, they didn't. They weren't trying to get back at me. They were male and female. But, you know, I just didn't want them doing a test case on me. I just go to the good stuff first, you know. And so all they do is they just send you home, and you just have to wait. So, but unlike giving birth, you know, happily, if it works, everything works out well, you get a nice, a baby out of it.
Right.
You know, passing a kidney stone, you just get this little thing. Yeah. You know, and then you have to, the other thing that's so embarrassing, you try to capture it. The doctor says, oh, try to get it. What do you mean, try to get it? So we want to sample it. We want to see what kind of stone it is, because then we can help diagnose and tell you how to avoid it in the future. So they give you this little strainer. And so, you know, how big is it, right? These are really small, which also pisses you off, pardon the pun. Because when you finally see it, You think, how could this little bugger be doing this to me? And so you finally, it happens, and you stop using the strainer after a day because it's just so embarrassing. I'm not peeing into a strainer anymore, and so it finally happens. You feel it happen, right? And then you're looking down and you say, "This is the question you're asking yourself: do I get it? Do I really want to get it?" And so your first instinct is call your wife, "Honey." Yeah. No. I'm not gonna force her to get it.
No.
So then the strategy comes into play, which is, do you use a ladle?
Yeah.
Like a strainer, like for your pasta? Like, what do you do to get it?
And then melt it.
And then you have to throw out the ladle because, of course, you don't want to do that. To cap it all off, this happened 3 weeks ago, and a week later, just bad planning, I had my regularly scheduled old person colonoscopy. So I'm barely recovered. I'm getting some of the color back in my face.
Right.
I go to the surgery, I go to the out-treatment patient center for the procedure, and the nice anesthesiologist comes to me, and he says, "Okay, are you nervous?" And I said, "No." He says, "Why are you not nervous?" He says, "Because I've been looking forward to sleeping for the last 2 weeks. I haven't slept for 2 weeks, so bring it on." Yeah. He says, "You'll only be under for about 20 minutes. I said, "Can you make it 40?
Yeah.
He says, no, the procedure's only, 20 minutes. I said, "Well, you can look around a little bit more." I just want to sleep. And so I've been through this thing over the last 3 weeks, guys, where one end and then the other end, and I said to Mary, I said, "I might as well schedule an endoscopy so they can go through all orifices of my body all at once and get maybe a discount for everything."
Yeah, it's a 3 for 1. Yeah.
So I just don't recommend it. It's not like it's not like you can avoid it. I don't think. But now when I get back home, I'm going to the doctor and saying, "I understand there's a technique where you just blast them all to hell."
Yeah.
So if there's any more sitting around in your kidneys, you can just blast them all and see what's going on. I presume it's safe. It doesn't seem safe. But I may be asking them to do that because 3 times over 15 years is just like 3 times too many.
So I feel like what this means is we never know what everybody else is going through, and so we all do need to be a little more understanding and realizing that there's things going on in our lives that sometimes you can't see what's going on. So
yeah, people say, "Why were you so animated yesterday during your session?" It's because you don't know what's going on inside. Pain is a great driver of this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So thank you for delving into my gastrointestinal personal life.
No, thank you for always being willing to talk about anything with us.
Literally.
Hey, look, that's why we sponsor this, so that I have free reign to talk about, whatever I want, but then hopefully Mr. Venable, when we're all done, listens to it and doesn't fire me.
I think we're just at the point you've been on so many times, we have to keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. If you haven't listened before, you got to catch up. You'll know everything about Fred, and then who knows what we'll talk about next time.
I know.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I know we're coming to the end of our time here, and again, thank you, Fred and Venable, for your support. Hopefully, it's continued.
Please come back.
We want to take a minute to thank our repeat and long-term sponsors as well, which includes Venable, Dawson, the Environmental Career Coach. I'm going to give another shout out to Smart Comment today for their sponsorship. And like I said, we're always looking for additional sponsors to keep this show going and help it get to more people. And also, don't forget to check out, this is me forgetting a line, remember to check out Smart Comment at www.smartcomment.com, okay?
That was 3 W's, not a...
Yeah. That's what usually happens on the show. I crush the ad read at the beginning, and that never happens. So
Well, thank you, Fred and Pam and Eileen, for being here today. And now that you all know what the show is about, if you haven't listened before, we highly encourage you to scan through the past episodes and catch up. We talked to a wide variety of environmental professionals from all backgrounds. If you've been on the show, raise your hand. Look at all these people. You can learn so much about them. And the next time you come to an event, you can say, hey, Gary, I listened to your episode. I got something to say to you. Or I liked your cow story, however that goes. But we talked to them about what they do, how they got their careers. If you're a younger professional looking to advance, this is a great opportunity to hear what kind of jobs are out there and what they're like. And we are just really excited to be here for the second year. Hopefully we'll be back next year. And yeah.
And that's our show. Thank you guys so much for being here and joining us in this another fun edition of a live show. Please stay tuned to the show. If it all goes well with the recording, we'll publish that as a regular episode soon. So you can tell everyone about Fred's kidney stones. So as always, see you, everybody.
Bye.